accepting our invitation. Yesterday we visited the site, but today we really have time to discuss the more governance managerial dimensions of the EcoBC with Rodrigo, who is directing the whole company there.
We are.
Right. So we have almost 1 hour 45 minutes, up to 11.
That's my presentation is actually.
Yeah, and then we have quite a lot of questions, I guess.
I think, Mohammed, you have to like caveat this with every speaker we have, is that we always have quite a lot of questions.
This is already communicated.
Well, thank you guys for having me here and letting us be part of such an important job that you guys are doing, and it's always we always feel very proud to be part of something like this and share our story. Obviously, we love to brag what we do because it's monumental, believe it or not, and I think you guys got a glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes over there in EcoBC. I'm not going to bore you with the beginning of our story because that's what Pepe did to you yesterday, so we'll just jump directly into the topic that we were requested to discuss today, which is technological and financial dimensions of the bike share system. Okay, so in order to discuss this, we need to have a perspective of the genesis of a bike share program, right? I mean, it's very important to really understand where it comes from and where it goes to and everything else. And it's not moving. Okay. There we go. All right. To such train of thought, we need to first identify the environment of the bike share system. Okay. The system will be introduced into a place and aside the obvious, which is geography, demographics. And this is not working the way it's supposed to be doing. Sorry. So when you're thinking about the installation of a system, the obvious is always geography, demographics, political exchange, so on. And it's very interesting to determine what you want to expect from the system and where you expect the system to go. So questions that need to be really objective is, how it will contribute to the policy objectives and the purpose and the vision, not only of the system itself, but of the government, okay, or the particular city in which this system is going to be introduced into. The other one is how it should be managed, okay, and there's several ways to manage this, and we were discussing this outside with some of you. It's not always the same thing. Even in our own organization, our operations across 20 different cities are totally different. Obviously, much more symmetric when it comes to Europe than it does with some of the other places, but it's very different when you start looking into it. And how to design or how to make it dynamic and adjustable to the environment in which it's going to be introduced into.
Sorry.
Yes?
I'm going to already start off with the questions, if that's okay. You don't mind if we ask questions? Okay, so on the first one, the contribute to policy objectives, purpose and vision.
Yep.
I wanted to ask your thoughts on like something that we've been thinking about with the advent of Uber in Kampala, which is how and even perhaps here, it's not just a contribution, but it actually shapes policy, and how like things like EcoBC are not only sort of contributing to existing frameworks, but are now like going a step further in shaping frameworks, and whether that's like, or shaping policies or shaping, and I wanted to know whether that's the case here, perhaps also with like, you have the sharing, the bike sharing, you have like how you work on a sort of communal system, whether all of that existed before or like there was some sort of contribution to it.
I'll tell you what, let's leave the questions to the end because it's part of the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
That way it's going to be easier. And obviously how to make it sustainable, okay? And I'm going to answer that question for you in a couple slides. The most important thing to remember is that one size does not fit all, okay? And this is a very clear misconception, not only in clothing, but also in, a shared system. And it's very important to understand what needs to be done on a system. Not every city is the same. As you were asking, not every policy is the same. Not everything is the same. So you really need to put this into a very important part of the topic, which is there is a trend for a lot of cities nowadays that everybody wants to put a share system, a bike share system in a city, right? And it's, yeah, we're going to put it in. And they just go out and buy from a particular producer or manufacturer of the system itself. But operating it is totally different. So when it comes to that, you need to really gather the information that you're going to take into account, which is the number of docking stations the system's going to have, the number of bikes, the number of users. Are you going to have a contact center? How is the contact center going to be created? And all these key factors, which, even though they're very obvious, need to be a very part of the system, and you need to include it to make it really successful. Okay? Now, considering that the catalyst for developing a bike share program varies from setting to setting, right? And in some places you have, people that are looking to ease congestion in the city. They're looking for sustainability. They're looking for low-cost, healthy access, air quality, all these things that everybody's really, it's more of a trendy thing. It's more of a trend topic than really a real solution for our cities. And we need to take all this into account. Now, me personally, okay, I believe that there is a misconception when it comes to understanding a bike share program. And what do I mean by this? There is a real potential in a system when it comes to the specifics of the system itself and in what it gives to a city and in what it gives to the society itself, okay? Meaning basically that the bike itself comes to be just a very little part of the system, okay? Everybody talks about the bikes, but in reality, it's got nothing to do with the bikes. Yes, the bikes are going to take you from point A to point B, but the reality of things is what comes behind the whole system itself, okay? And by this, we're looking at building a more important integration of our cities. And the whole idea of taking the information that we gather upon a system is to make old dying cities into smart cities, right? I mean, also a trendy topic for everybody. Everybody wants to make a smart city nowadays. Everybody's looking to, say no more cars in our cities. Everything's going to be electrical. Everything's going to be intermodal, which is perfect. But the reality is, how are we going to do it, okay? So, speaking from Smart Bike's standpoint of view, okay, let me explain, and so that I can go into the technological portion of the dimension that's behind the system, and that really takes the information that we have and we gather to really build a true change or a true transformation of our cities into something much more, okay? So, there we go. So our cycle stations basically are the ones that do all the work in our system. Okay, so you have 4th generation systems, which is this, where you're finding people coming into our cycle stations, grabbing a bike, finding a bike, using a bike, returning the bike. And the whole thing behind it is try to find which is the best way to balance the cycle stations across the city and balance the number of bikes that users can find on each one of the cycle stations so that the system is actually reliable and it's truly community-based and share-based for everybody, okay? And there's a lot of things that go behind this and how we manage high-density cycle stations versus low-density cycle stations. Now, the really important thing about our system is that it's a static, okay? Even though bike share systems are dynamic, when you are talking about the whole public transportation scheme of things, our system is extremely dynamic, right? Because if you have a metro or a metro, it's linear, right? It goes from point A to point B. You have very specific routes. You have different types of tunnels that go to the east, to the west, everywhere else. If you're talking about the Metrobus, it's the same thing. If you're talking about whatever you're talking, trains, everything's very, very static. A bike share system is extremely dynamic, and that's why it's a great solution to put into a system or a transportation system of a city, because it helps provide a more alternative way of transportation for everybody, right? A bike, you take it everywhere. There's no real lane that you have to take, and it's only going to take you that way. If you want to cross the street, you cross the street. If you want to go to the other side, if you want to stop at a store, then you can do all of this with a bike. Yet, between bike share programs, there are programs such as ours, which are static, and there are programs which are more dynamic. So our system is based on static cycle stations. This means the cycle stations are based, and they're only in one specific point of the city. There's one point where you can gather your bike, and there's another point where you can deliver your bike. Whether this is across the city, in a very specific area, it doesn't matter, but it's always very static. In this sense of things, our model, in a lot of cities, obviously, across the world, like this model more than fifth generation cycle shares, which you have the technology on the bikes, and you can actually reserve the bike, or you can actually leave the bike anywhere you want because it has a GPS and it tells you exactly where they are, and you can find them. A lot of the cities enjoy this model more because it's so much more cleaner. It's always reliable because you know exactly where you're going to find a cycle station every single time, and you know that in that cycle station you will always find a bike. Okay, so in the model of Mexico City, this was just the perfect solution. Why? Because obviously our city is very chaotic, as you guys seen yesterday. It's not an easy city. We have a lot of things happening at the same time. A lot of complications, traffic, a lot of things that other cities in the world really do not enjoy of, if that's a word. So, talking about the technological dimensions on our system, okay, and what we gather, we are really talking about all the information that we gather to help make our cities so much better. And I'm putting here a lot of dashboards that we use, and some of you were talking earlier about big data, right? So it's also a trending topic. Everybody wants to talk about big data. But the idea of big data is to really interpret the information and how you're going to put it to use, okay? So a lot of the things that we do in IGLUS is that all this information that we gather from our system is put to use directly, not only into cycle public policy, but also into the actual infrastructure of the city, okay? So for example, a lot of the information that we provide helps design better roads, better sidewalks, helps design better traffic signage, traffic engineered and logistics, the lights, the traffic lights and everything else. It talks about the social needs that we have, whether you're facing it into microeconomy of the city itself, or you're talking about a more social aspect of the system or of the city itself. We're talking about law enforcement itself, right? A lot of our cycle stations are intermediate, which means they communicate with local government systems such as the law enforcement system, okay? In such a sense that all this integration of data that we produce, we deliver for, unfortunately, we don't do a lot of the public policy ourselves, so it's given to the government so that they can transform it and put it into use, okay?
Do they? Because Jose yesterday was saying that there's a lot of potential, like as you say, but perhaps not a lot of action on it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, not all of it gets used by the government as it should. And unfortunately, even though we as citizens of this world are, should demand that this happens, unfortunately not all the time we can actually make it happen. So we do our best effort to continue providing this information to the government, and even though if they're not using it, we keep on providing information in a sense or in a way that it's readable for them and that they can actually understand and interpret what needs to be done, okay? And I'll give you a perfect example. Pepe's job, right? So yesterday he was talking about all of this, and while he's doing and talking about this, we're having an average of 1.7 accidents a day in this city based on our system. Now he's in charge of delivering the right modality to attend to such accidents. As he explained yesterday, our system has an insurance, a medical insurance that covers you in case of any accidents. And when this happens, we have to send somebody from our part to attend the accident, make sure that they have the right legal information, they have information for medical, you know, we help them sort out whatever happens. We have a specific dashboard of information that provides very specific data on regards to the accidents, how they happen, okay? Because, I mean, how many of you would think that in Mexico City people get run over by cars?
I would assume so.
Well, you would be mistaken. The reality is that almost 83% of our accidents happen because of the user itself and the lack of their ability to ride a bike, okay? And even though we do have a very specific catalog to determine whether it's been a traffic accident or a fall or it has to do with the road or something like that, a lot of our users crash into cars, which is beautiful, right? And why is that? It's because they're riding on the sidewalk, it's because they're riding in the wrong way of the street, it's because they really don't care about lights, they do a lot of stupid things, believe me. And they crash with cars. It's very common. And now we have a lot of money put into fixing cars, right? Yeah, it's beautiful. But the other interesting thing is that we have a lot of accidents that happen because how the roads are and how they're managed, okay? And for example, we tell the government and we say, listen guys, this specific road, for example, we have a very specific area of Reforma, which is basically between the statue of Cuauhtémoc, that is almost across the street from our office, all the way down to El Caballito. So you probably, when you were going downtown, you probably saw, you guys went through Reforma?
Yeah,
right.
when we turn in Juarez.
Exactly. When you turn in Juarez, which is that street which is beautiful and it has the Alameda and it has the Bellas Artes and everything else, that section of the road is where most of our accidents happen, okay? And a lot. And why is this? And it's got to do with the fact that there is really poor signage on the roads. They have not implemented, even though they have a lane, a specific lane, closed lane for the bikes, they have not maintained that area of the street. So you probably noticed it yesterday, it's kind of bumpy, it's got a lot of potholes, it's got a lot of coladeras, rain drainage, yeah, whatever. Forgot the name. And there's no real signage in a lot of these crossings. We have really big crossings in this area, right? So you have big avenues crossing into Reforma, and there's in reality not a really very specific determined design on the street. So we provide this information to the policymakers, and in theory they're trying to change this, whether it's to push for betterment of the road, or whether it's to push a more specific policy in regards to how the road should be and how it should work, right? And you guys are studying all of this, so you won't let me lie. When nowadays when you were crossing the street, you had the zebras or the crossing paths. They're always linear, right? Well, now the trend is different, right? They look very geometrical when you look at them, because people, we are not cows. Okay, so we don't walk like this in a very specific linear way. So if you're going to cross the street, in reality I don't want to cross to that point because I am actually going that way. So, hence, you have to change the way that the signage on the street itself is done and how it's fabricated. So that's part of everything that's changing. One of the things that, regarding your question, how it applies or how we help apply into public policy, nowadays in Mexico City you will find that you will have the zebra, the crossing path, and then you have a gap of 2.5 meters between the zebra and where the cars should actually stop, which are for either motorbikes or bicycles themselves. Why is this? Well, it comes down to a lot of the information that we provide, where the problem that a lot of the users of, cycling users or motorbike users have is that they tend to go between the cars, right? So they really don't care. You go in between the lines and you get in front of the cars, and then you are the first to start going.
In the past, that implied that you were going to be in front of a peatonal crossing. So that's complicated, right? Because now, if you're a walking pedestrian, now you have to go around the bikes and into the lane which is crossing, and then you had a lot of accidents, right? So a lot of this stuff has helped determine a lot of the things that we're doing. Now, not necessarily everything comes from IGLUS Mexico, but you know, we help determine and provide the hard data to make this happen. Okay. As far as dimensions that we have, the system is so much complex than people think, right? And I go back to the key point that I mentioned earlier. The system is not all about the bike itself, okay? It's actually, the bike is probably one of the smallest component of a bike share system. And not a lot of people will tell you this, okay? And some of you were asking me earlier where I come from and what's my background. And given my background, I am free to talk about this and tell you guys, the bike, yeah, it's the ultimate idea behind a bike share program, but it's a very small component of the bike program, okay? Kind of weird, but it is. And when it comes down to the financial dimensions of the system, there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that people do not see. And you guys were witness about this yesterday when you were walking around our shop. And you're looking at almost 300 people working to maintain one of the largest systems in the world, okay? And you have things such as tools, which people rarely think about. And when you have 300 people working, there's 300 people that need tools. There's 300 people that need uniforms. There's spare parts both for bikes and our mobility vehicles. There's gas for the vehicles, and if you guys seen the news lately, we have what we call the gasolinazo here in Mexico, and the gas has gone up to match most of your country's standards, but for us it's not fun. So we are very, very concerned about this. We have personal security equipment, we have systems, we have digital marketing, we have contact centers, we have a ton of things that are happening, and people do not see these, okay? So, yesterday I know some of you asked Pepe about how this works with the government itself and who's paying for what, okay? And Mexico City, specifically Mexico City, has a very particular way of approaching public transportation, okay? Public transportation in our city is 99% subsidized by the government, whether it's the Metro, Metrobus, IGLUS, you name it. They subsidize it. Why? Because there is obviously, to my point of view, obviously, and don't quote me on that, but it's a political thing more than an actual public policy thing. Why? Because we're talking about families that do not have enough money, or they're not making enough money to actually be spending on public transportation. We did a study earlier this year, and it turns out that 80% of the people that move into the city or move across our city spend an average of 780 pesos on public transportation a month, okay? So that's, well, with the new exchange rate, that's about $3, but no, it's close to what, 40-something dollars more or less, which is a lot of money, okay? And this is even though the system or the public transportation system is subsidized. So there is this, duality whether we want to charge more for the system and make it more sustainable, or do we want to make more sustainable life of our citizens? And there's something I cannot deal with because that's not my job, but where the policy makers have to deal with every day. Okay. Yet, IGLUS is still the cheapest way to move around the city. When you go into the metro in Mexico City, it costs you 5 pesos. Every time you ride the train, it's going to cost you 5 pesos. Whether you go one station or 18 kilometers, it doesn't matter. When you ride in IGLUS, Every time you ride EcoBici, whether it's 2.5 meters to put it back in the same cycle station, or spend your 45 minutes free of charge to drive around everywhere you want, it's going to only cost you 5 cents of a peso. Yes?
Except it will be cheap for those people who have a credit card, who can access the system, or have a computer, can log into the system, right? Like for those people because we were asking Pepe this yesterday, and he was saying that you need to have some sort of legal backing, financial backing in case the bike is not.
Exactly.
Right? And then he was saying that there is still like the other option of like getting it on your landline, but who has a landline these days? Like
Everybody.
Really?
In Mexico, and specifically Mexico City, there's still almost 85% of the people in this city use a landline. And I'll tell you why. It's got to do with a lot of, it's not about a technology, it's not a technology thing. It is about a sustainability of legality thing more than anything else. And why do I mean by this? When, how many of you guys are from Mexico? You 2? 3, there you go.
Mexico City?
Bueno, de Mexico. Doesn't matter where in Mexico. At the end of the day, it's the same thing, right?
Yes.
So when you go and you want to, I don't know, get a credit, what's the first thing that they ask you for? Comprobante de domicilio. That means you need to have something that tells the lender that you actually live in that specific place. And so what is the only legal documents that banks, and I'm just talking about banks, okay? It could be getting a new phone, a mobile phone. What do they ask for? It's predial, which is the cost of paying for your property, water, which is the cost of paying for your water, or a landline. Because if you have internet connection, that's not valid, unless it comes with a landline, right? If you have, if you have on your home whatever, it's not going to happen. So, for example, electricity is not valid as a document that tells you that you live in that place. It's very weird, but it's got a reason behind it. So, landlines are still highly used in this country.
That's actually super interesting, just on an aside point. So like in a lot of the African countries, we've skipped landlines. We don't have them, right? We went straight from 0 to mobile phones. But in essence,
when you say mobile phones, you mean 3 or 4 from different companies.
3 or 4, yeah.
Yeah.
One with each network.
Exactly.
But that means also that we've probably skipped one fairly obvious form of like legality and tenure, which I never thought of either.
Yeah. So again, one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
Okay. This is not the same case in Spain, for example, with Clear Channel, or in Chile, in Santiago, it's not the same case. It really needs to be accommodated to not only the financial needs of the system, the policy needs of the system, and the legal needs of the system need to be taken into account. Because again, a lot of people just say, I'm the new mayor of the city and I want a shared bike system because it's smart, it's it's going to be ecological, sustainable, blah, blah, blah. And it turns it's not. Okay? And we have in this country several examples. Toluca is one of them, right? So it's the capital of our neighboring state of Edomex. And they paid for the exact same hardware that Santander London bike share system has, City Bike New York has. It's beautiful. It's a great system. It's super technological. It doesn't work. And why is that? Because nobody actually thought about the true nature of the system, which is not the bike. The true nature of the system is what are you going to do with the bike share system, and not only what it's going to cost you, but what are the technological dimensions behind it to use it for a better thing. And obviously it comes all down to the same thing, operating the system. If you do not know how to operate a system, it's going to fail. And I know that Matthias asked yesterday about why did we get out of Washington, right, as Clear Channel.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest problems that we had. The core business of this company is digital advertising services, because we don't do advertising, we do services. Okay? And by services, obviously our core business, actually it's funny, but our core business is radio. Right? So we are iHeartMedia in the States, which is the largest radio mogul in the world. But then we have the digital servicing for this. But in Europe we have public bathrooms. In Chile we have panic buttons. We also have them in some places in Europe. We also have bike share systems, right? So it's all about, you know, providing a major service, providing services that serve a major service, which is our core business. And that provides us with something a lot of other companies do not have, which is actual knowledge about operating larger systems. And not only am I talking about this, I'm talking about so many more things that come with this, okay? And when you look at the other examples in this country that have failed or are failing, for example, Guadalajara, which is also very big, it's got a very nice system, the system's actually pretty cool also. The operation is really bad. The government took it upon themselves to operate. And even though they have better things than we do as a system, okay, their app is so much cooler than ours, by far. Our app sucks. Our app's terrible. Now, it's not our fault. The government doesn't want to invest on the app. Okay? So there's not much we can do about it. Yet, we find solutions about it. For example, now we have, there's a company called Biko, B-I-K-O, and what they do is that it's one of these global, how do you call them? It's kind of like a global barter economy thing, where you, for every kilometer that you ride on your bike, it's going to provide you with a point. And that point is redeemable with, I don't know, Starbucks or whatever for a coffee. You know, it depends on the deals that they make. And the really cool thing about them is that they're originally from Colombia, and they're in Bogota, and they're in Medellin, they're in Canada, and they're in San Fran, and they're all over the place.
It's not Dutch.
No, Biko is Colombian. And it's, the guys are pretty cool, you know. But the most important thing that they've done is that they've taken technology to the next step. And the aspect of technology itself and what it maps provides a lot of information for us, for example, because my users are their users, right? So I use their base to help me complement the stuff that I don't have. And it provides a lot of information, and we cross, you know, things. And then the community is happy because they can go and buy Starbucks that's going to cost you 2 for 1 or whatever. And people are happy.
I'm still not entirely sure why Washington, D.C. didn't work for you.
Sorry. So Washington, D.C. didn't work for us because I was trying to remember when I was all mentioning all of this. Because we didn't get the publicity that we wanted. Okay, so we were actually contending for the bus stops and, you know, all the public furniture on the street, so that we could actually put publicity services, and we didn't get them. So, and the whole idea of us putting a system, which is the same thing that we did in Mexico City, or we did in Spain, or we do everywhere else, is that we provide the system itself to give something back to the community, as well as we're taking back from the community. Why? Because obviously, as all of you know, everybody hates publicity on the street. It's terrible, urbanists complain about it, it's architects complain about it, it makes our cities ugly, so on and so forth, but it's still needed. Yes?
And the idea there was the same like here, to provide the bicycle service and to receive the positions.
Exactly.
Or they would allow you to put the advertisement on the bicycles.
No, it's for the positions.
Okay, but they would allow you to put on the bicycles the advertisement?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be feasible?
No. And let me just, before I answer your question, just so you get an idea, the system in Mexico costs, this is public information, you can find it in La Gaceta, wherever, costs 200 million pesos, okay? That's close to $15 million a year.
15?
15. 15
Yesterday?
They told us 8.8 million.
Yeah.
No, no, yesterday he said $170 million that the government gave. Pesos. That the government gave them, and another quarter of this comes from the money that people paid.
Exactly.
So that's
8 million.
So you said
yes,
15 million
200 million.
pesos?
8
No,
million.
A year.
200 millones de pesos,
Mhm.
200 million
Yeah.
pesos is
Yeah.
what the system
Yeah.
costs. Right?
The
So last year
operation.
the operation, and this is very important, okay?
Yeah, but
Because
200 is less than 15.
hold on. 200 million pesos is what the system costs. Costs.
Operating costs.
Operating costs. There you go.
A year.
A year. Okay. The government is giving us, Clear Channel, 174 million pesos. Okay. Now, the money that we charge, which is ridiculous, which is 400 pesos a year, which is the cheapest in the world. Okay. How much are you paying in Washington for a year's subscription?
$75 a year because I'm an old customer. I think it's now 85.
85, exactly. Okay.
But
We're paying less than 15 bucks a year. Okay, it's ludicrous. Now that money we don't see it, okay, because it doesn't come to Clear Channel. That money is paid directly to the government, and I don't know what they do with it, but we never see it.
in Rio it's $33 a
Comparatively, they
year.
are expensive.
Sorry,
In Rio it's $33 a year.
in our
Rio.
system.
In Rio.
Ah, in Rio. Yeah. See,
But you can pay monthly $2.50. It's
more or less,
yeah.
which is pretty good, right? I mean, and you
Yeah,
guys.
but the system definitely they don't have the management system that you have definitely because the bikes are
But then again, in Rio, the whole.
do you know the model?
Yeah, and I know the guys. Is the,
Do they have the same management system as you?
No, they don't. But in Rio, the system that you guys in Rio is part of a larger scheme of things company, because they do all the logistics for public transportation in Brazil. Because they do the buses, what's that was
Stop buses?
yeah, the ERTs. They manage the federal logistics for supply chain between Curitiba and I think it's Sao Paulo. So it's so much bigger than this, okay? So they don't do publicity, but they do that. And they're really good about it. Their system is pretty cool. On regards to the logistics behind transportation, ours is different because ours provides totally different data than theirs do, right? So if you're talking about transportation and logistics, that system is actually pretty neat because it's giving you so much more data in regards to logistics than our system provides in regards to logistics. Now their deficiencies are that they don't provide the data that we provide on top for the actual policy thing, right? So you're never going to find the right system. Believe me, you can go and look on social bicycles. You can look at PBS. Everyone's providing different things, right? We're a niche kind of business, so we try to find it. Sorry.
But can you finish what happens with the budget? Because we're going to lose this discussion.
Okay.
You said it's $15 million.
So
Right.
to the exchange rate,
And
it's
we stopped at 200 million pesos.
so 200 million pesos. I'll talk in pesos so we don't confuse things. So 200 million pesos. I get paid 170 million pesos from the government each year to operate the system. So I'm operating at a deficit of 36 million pesos. Who pays for that? We do. How can we pay for that and make it sustainable? Because we have the counterpart of getting the spots for publicity. And obviously publicity pays a ton more money than the bikes do, obviously. So what we do is we make money from our spots on publicity across the city, and we're able to put, we call it, I don't like the term, but we call it, well, the government, when I say we, I mean the government and us, we call it a site lease term payment. So it's kind of like our site lease payment for being on the city. So that deficit is paid by Clear Channel to be able to compensate
the
for
deficit
the loss.
is 36 million, but you didn't show the money that comes from the 400 pesos.
Because we don't see that money, that goes directly to the government.
Okay, okay.
It would be great if that money came to us,
No,
because
no,
we could
okay,
actually
okay.
make it much more efficiently, you know, we would manage more efficiently than the government does. And this is no surprise to anybody, right? I
But you
mean,
know how
companies
much
are more
they
efficient
receive yearly?
financially than governments.
Do you know how much they receive yearly?
Yeah, they make, they make close to, this year, 2016, they made close to 42 million pesos.
42.
So that would actually cover if it came to.
Yes,
That would
that's
cover
why.
our deficit,
Yes, that's why they give just 107.
in theory. But the reality is that
Yeah.
that money doesn't come back to us to operate.
So, I'm really impressed how well Pepe briefed you, like that you even know who asked which question is
Come on.
very, very But I wanted to get back to, sorry, I just want to finish the Washington DC one, because Washington DC, so you pulled out for reasons that were your business reasons.
Yes.
Washington DC still has a bike sharing system
Yes, they do.
now, right?
Mhm.
So is that because like, do you know who runs it? Or
It's run by Deco Bikes, which is JC Deco and
so
Rose Paris.
JC Deco is also an advertising
Obviously.
agency,
And
right?
they're the owners of Velo, Yellow.
Yeah.
I always pronounce it wrong.
So,
In
but-
Paris.
So what like made them want to then enter that market? And because I'm assuming they want the same
It's
thing.
the same thing.
They were just able to negotiate it better, or like
They agreed to the terms, we didn't.
I see. Okay, so this was really.
There was a bidding process with a negotiation that we didn't accept, and they did. It's as simple as that. I'll put you another example
so
on
you
the
didn't
table.
pull out, or you did. You had something.
We
you
had-
pulled out.
So one of the things that we do, which I hate doing, it's kind of like company policy, is that we do a pilot.
Sure.
Pilots do not work, ever, in any business, in anything. It's a ton of money wasted by companies to prove a proven point. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but, right? I mean, this is proven. Why do I have to prove to you that it actually works? Why would I have to give you a computer? No, please try my Mac, and if you like it in a month, then you can come buy me a Mac. Come on, you know it works.
Yeah, you know it works in different circumstances.
If you know it works. That's the whole point. But anyway, that's my personal point of view of things. But the company doesn't see it this way. So we make a pilot in every case, in every city that we go to. We go install the bikes, we install the cycle stations, we make a very detailed process plan of how the city should look like and how it should be implied and worked with the government, so on and so forth. But in order for this to work, it's very, very important that you guys understand this, is that why do we have such a success in Mexico City and other systems do not have the same success? Even Washington, D.C. is a perfect example. Why is Washington, D.C. within the metrics of the overall systems in the world, probably all the way down the line of the systems? It's not even considered a very sustainable system. It works, but in terms of how it works, it doesn't work very good. And it comes down to one single thing, and you'll see it across every successful bike share system out there. The interaction between the government as a regulator and as an observer and as a participant of the system itself make it work wonders, okay? And I can show you a SWOT table on that, and it's not mine, it's by the French Polytechnique. It's very clear, right? Denver is another perfect example. And I'm giving you examples of first world examples, right? Denver doesn't work.
Yeah, great, great. We made a lot of questions, and your question was the best. How it can work here and not in another place, and definitely is the relationship between the company and the government.
In the government.
Yeah, but your widespread depends on the government also.
Obviously.
And yesterday, I realized that they wouldn't spread as you need and as you want, because yesterday Jose showed that you just have 2% of the,
Yeah.
I mean, the market.
Our plan for Mexico City is very ambitious, for example. And, you know,
But
I would love to
in the
show
end,
you
it's
some
politics.
examples of what we just presented. Unfortunately, I can't. But the system needs to expand. One of the things that I really, really like about, earlier we were discussing my credentials, right? So I come from telecom. And one of the things that I really find, well, first I'm a cyclist, so I'm passionate about cycling. But one of the things that it's really cool to see on telecom and to see on this specific business, I'm talking about the bike shirts business, not the media business, is that they're an animal by themselves. It's a living organism. They grow organically, according to needs and according to the actual growth of a city or a country or a population, whatever you want to call it. It grows with it, right? And my largest discussion nowadays with Dr. Mancera, who's the mayor of the city, is that he doesn't understand that our system needs to grow. It has to evolve. It has to transform, because the city itself has transformed. And not only has it transformed, it has adopted the system to such a point that people demand it in other places where we don't have it, where it's needed, okay? Now, the other great thing about this relationship between the government and the company, or the private company, whatever you want to call it, is that the system itself is not only about dropping cycle stations here and there to cover the city. It's about having a plan, an intermodal plan on transportation. My cycle stations are strategically put, and they keep on moving. We keep on moving them across the city, depending on how the city itself moves, with, you know, attraction points, intermodal transportation points, microeconomy centers, okay? Stuff like that really manages how, it dictates how we manage or operate the system, okay? So depending on how we see the trend in the city, how it's moving, how it's working, we need to move across the city with it, right? So throughout the last 7 years in Ecobici, the system has moved a lot of cycle stations in order to understand where they should be or shouldn't be, right? One of the slides previous where I was showing all the different dashboards that we have a dashboard that tells us what cycle stations have the most amount of uses and which ones don't. According to that, the ones that are not having too much interaction, we can definitely take a look at it and say, you know what, the reason behind this is that they actually changed, or they actually put a new line of the Metrobus that goes from, you know, across this area. So obviously people are not going to ride their bikes, they're rather going to bus, and they you know, we're lazy, unfortunately.
But, sorry, just to push that point a little further, when you said, like, the sole thing is to do with the relationship between the company and the government, isn't another thing to have the two separate? Like, what if, because, like, the perfect relationship would be if the government is also the company, right? So, like, technically, right, by this definition. So is another, like, factor having them split, having the company and, like, the person implementing and the regulator split, or not necessarily?
I'm not following your question.
So you said, like, the main thing that makes this work
Mm-hmm.
is the relationship between the company and the government,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you took that to its furthest level, then the perfect relationship would be if the government was also running it, right? Because it's one relationship. There's no like, but in my mind, what you're telling us is actually having them split, like, so having a company, a private, for all these reasons you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
run the system and not the government
Exactly.
running the system is
Mhm.
actually also a point. So, like, if the government were to run the system, it doesn't have all these this experience running system, or maybe in different experience running systems, etc., etc.
So exactly. So and again, it's not me saying this. This is something that you guys do some research and you'll find it. Government-based operations are less successful than this relationship, private-public relationships. Okay.
I would like to add something. Is it possible for you to know from the total trips which percentage is like a last mile trip, or is it not
Yeah.
possible? So what percentage is that, and what?
On you mean on
Based on-
a
Before
regular?
answering that, maybe let's finish up answering question because these are two simple questions. So
Okay.
let's get that answer, the relation, and get to this because I thought you're gonna
I
follow
thought I
up on
answered
that.
that one, but
Yeah,
so
Okay.
yeah, the why is it, do you want me to?
yeah. Let's just do the answer because the answer
So
was not
no, I mean,
complete.
okay, are there governments who run these systems?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, when you look at it, and
It is less efficient.
it is less efficient, right? And perfect example is Washington, Denver, Guadalajara, China.
I see. Okay.
Sorry. So to your question, when you're saying the last mile percentage, you mean of the actual total trip of an individual
Yes.
through across all intermodal?
I mean, from all
modes of
the
transportation.
individuals, of all the users that you have in your system.
Okay, so the base of my users, which ones do the last mile, use the system for our last mile?
Yes,
Okay, it's about 70%.
70% is a last mile trip.
Okay, 30%, and how do we determine this? Because probably somebody's gonna ask this. It's very simple.
The car.
Yeah, well, we know, so how do we, the way that our technology manages is that we know where the trip origins and where it finishes, okay? And actually the percentage I'm giving you is wrong. Specifically for last mile, that's a percentage. The way they use the system itself, it's 50-50, and I'll explain this in a bit. So, Buena Vista, this is a place in Mexico City where we have 7 million people coming into the city, 3 million people coming into the city every single day. Okay? Every single day, 3 million people arrive to that train station, grab a metro, grab a Metrobus, grab an Ecobici, or get in, the killer, los micros, they're at that trap. So, that's 3 million people, okay, use that. That's 7 million people, almost, going back and forth in that specific point. I'm counting also operators, drivers, so on and so on. It's a ton of people doing this, a lot. Our trips, we have 12 cycle stations of 47 bikes on that specific point of the city. Every morning, they have to be completely full, okay? It has a very specific condition that none of our other cycle stations have. So when you go there in the morning, you will not find a slot to put a bike, which is kind of contradicting to the system. But why is that? Because all the people are grabbing a bike there, and they're driving their bikes towards Reforma or Polanco or wherever their last working place is. So that's kind of like a last mile, okay? Yet these people have to then, at night, grab a bike from any of the other cycle stations and get back to that specific point to go back home, okay? So yeah, about 70% of the people use the bikes for last mile trips, but in reality, the way that the system is balanced is almost 50-50. Because all the people that are using the bikes for the last mile are also using bikes to come back.
Yes, so this 30% use it for the whole trip, from point A to point B. So 30% use the bike with no intermodal mode.
Exactly.
Like tourists.
Not necessarily.
Maybe because you live
neighborhood.
Exactly.
Oh, I see.
So for example, Roma, Condesa, a lot of the people live there and work there.
I see.
So they grab a bike here to go to lunch, to go to breakfast, to go to work, and so it's not necessarily a last mile, because in reality that's their main use of transportation.
But how can you differentiate both trips? Is like only because of the stations that are close to the stop?
Exactly. Just because of the intermodal dependency of the stations.
Okay.
Okay, so when we do this, we have attraction points, which can be a business center, a shopping center, whatever. And we have intermodal points, which are points where public transportation originates or arrives, okay, which are metros, metrobus, so on and so forth. And that's the way that we determine that those trips are basically last mile.
Okay.
Why also? Because then we know that, and unfortunately, I don't think I have a chart, I don't have internet here, but I could show you how it works, where you can see actually how people grab the bikes, and I'm giving that example because it's so obvious, right? I mean, so there's 3 million people, it's a ton. So they grab the bikes there, and you'll see how they drop the bikes on the most used cycle stations on our system, which are Reforma, mostly Reforma towards Polanco, not towards Polanco, towards Condesa and Roma.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely enough, Polanco, some of our least used bikes. So, you know, that's how we determine it.
And with these cards that are already linked with a that works also for Metrobus card, can you track also, like?
I wish.
Okay.
Yesterday I was in, I gotta show you guys this, I love this card. I was in a meeting with the director of the Metro, and because we were discussing exactly this, right? They have a lot of information regarding the trips and everything, but their system is not a system. It's like 5,000 people putting. But I love the card. It's a Metro ticket, and the numbers of the ticket are actually the phone number. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
It is.
So anyway, unfortunately, you come down to every mayor saying, oh yeah, we're gonna be a smart city. Well, in order to be a smart city, forget about putting Wi-Fi on the street and actually have communication between systems. That's the first thing. And unfortunately, our mayors across the world, the first thing that they think that a smart city is having Wi-Fi, right? It's like, oh yeah, we have Wi-Fi. It's free. Oh yeah, it's incredible. But nobody understands how the freak the metro works versus the Ecovisi versus. We don't know that. How are we going to make a more intelligent city if we don't cross-reference this data and try to understand exactly how it works? And now that is big data. And transforming big data into informative graphic information that can determine what are we going to do or how we're doing or what are we doing wrong or what are we doing right. Okay? Sorry, Fabiola.
My question is not related with that, so it was before.
Okay.
So in Paris, for example, the contract is is better for the city because they pay €0 to GCDECO, and GCDECO provide all the system for €0. It depends from the contract. Why?
You really think that?
I'm sure because I asked to a guy to GCDECO who is my friend.
Yeah.
But
we could discuss that for